Hello, this is Dr. Leah Andrews, and welcome to Tea with Dr. Leah. And this, of course, is Oben. Today we're going to talk about water. So that explains my slightly eccentric getup. I want to exemplify the 5 elements over these next few weeks. So as part of self-diagnosis, if you go to my website, leahandrews.com, there's a section there on self-diagnosis. I think it's really important for us to start understanding our own bodies, our own personalities, our own makeup, and that's how we can best live a good life and balance ourselves, because it's not just about going to see a professional. We need to educate ourselves so that every day in our lives we're living as best we can. And I thought for the water element, what better tea than Kava. This is a root that originates in the South Pacific Islands. It's used all over for ceremonial purposes. It was really popular back in the 90s, and it's had a recent resurgence. There's Kava bars now for people to sip and relax. Basically, it calms down the muscles and it turns you inward. So it relaxes the stress, all of that outward go drive energy that we are just programmed in Western society now. It kind of switches that off, turns us inward, more relaxed, more focused on the spiritual, on deeper thoughts, very water activities. So water element, first, physically, what does water look like? Water has an amorphous face shape, meaning that there's no distinctive facial shape. Like wood is very rectangular, earth might be rounder, fire has a lot of triangles in the features. Water is like the element water. It takes it morphs into whatever container you put it in, and the water people kind of do the same thing. So it's the hardest element to pinpoint because they're constantly kind of morphing into whatever the beholder wants to see or whatever the environment around them is. But if you can't distinguish a very distinct facial shape, you might be looking at a water person. If they have these big, dreamy, bedroom, sultry eyes, you're probably looking at a water person. They tend to have more energy on the lower part of the cheeks, which we call the puchis. These are called the money bags in Chinese face reading in Mianxiang. This means you have good resources, good genetic resources, means that which usually translates into being able to generate money. And you have good qi, good reserves of energy. Usually you can keep going until you can generate what you want in life. Water is also very they tend to dress in dark colors. They tend to have narrowing of the waist. So women tend to have hourglass figures, not always, but even men tend to have a little bit of a hip to them. There's this real curviness to water people. They tend to be more fleshy and soft. Even if they go to the gym, they don't tend to get those tight, sinewy muscles. They tend to be more soft and undulating. Again, just like the element of water. In terms of dress, again, going back, they tend to wear darker colors. They tend to like more vintage or mysterious kinds of styles. So, for example, women might wear veils. They might be into more vintage dressing, like 1940s style. Like to wear capes, maybe a little eccentric. Both men and women tend to like dressing in period pieces, so like medieval, kind of dressing up for medieval festivals and things like that. That's a very water type of activity. Also, a lot of the more kind of hippie yoga, spiritual outfits where they're very flowy and free-form and kind of eclectic and pulling from different cultures and different time periods. Those are very water types of styles. In terms of health, water tends to develop have issues with development, so not having interruptions in normal development. So, for example, Einstein is a perfect example of a water person. He didn't speak until he was 3 years old, and so there was a developmental delay, and that caused him to really use a lot of really deep visual capacity for him because he didn't have the verbal capacity developed yet. And that's why he is who he is. That's why he was able to do what he did later on in life, was because of that incredible ability to visualize different theories in his mind. So water people tend to be like that, where they're not kind of moving along at the stages maybe that they're supposed to be. There might be some hiccups, but then it can really serve them later on. There can also be developmental issues that are more serious as well. So, for example, especially with hormonal things, girls might have issues getting their first period. It doesn't come until much later, and there's issues getting the first period. They might have fertility issues later on in life. Even though water women are I think the happiest pregnant women I've seen are water women. There's a real urge to have a baby, typically with water women, but there's also tends to be an issue with fertility with water. So that can be a real challenge in terms of health. Water I think, avoids a lot of the issues because of their personality of Western society, because water is by nature flowing. They tend to not get a lot of lines on their face because they kind of float through. So there's not that much of that reactivity that you see with pretty much every other element. They may cause reactivity in others, and they often do, in the sense that they are often late. Time is a real issue for water. So, for example, if they have a deadline, it's not that they're being mean or inconsiderate, it's that they're dreaming, they're daydreaming, they're thinking about other things, they're distracted. It's very hard for them to live within the structure of this world, of this life. It's all about expansion and kind of seeing beyond the boundaries. They are really drawn to mystery and kind of going into the unknown. And so the idea of having these, kind of what for them would seem unnecessary structure and boundaries that don't really serve anything, it's difficult for them to grasp. And so that's one of the real challenges of water. If you want to have a job and a relationship, you have to actually show up on time. And so one of the real challenges for water is to become conscious of time and really stick to deadlines. And typically in terms of work, because they can be great visionaries and creative types, they often do well when they're paired with a good mental assistant who can keep them, kind of on track and within certain boundaries that are necessary. So, for example, Einstein had a wife who made sure he ate and kind of functioned daily, so he could, mentally go out into the ethers. So water really does need that balance of someone who can help ground them and bring them into the daily life. And so in terms of relationship, water is very, there's a few ways it can go. So water loves depth, and so they really are drawn to things like Tantra or Taoist sexuality, because there's a lot of mystery and going deeper, and also the sensuality of it. So you really are focusing on the senses and heightening the senses and bringing them into play in a way that I think mainstream sexuality doesn't do. I think we are almost the antithesis. Western society has the antithesis of sensuality. It's almost like we're killing sensuality in our sexual energy, and water really thrives on preserving that. I mean, water thrives on the sensual experience of eating and deep conversations with people. And so for sure, in terms of sexuality and relationship, they want that kind of depth and sensuality and a little bit of mystery. There is also, if water is unbalanced, they can be very good at manipulation and mind games, probably better than anybody else. I think of either the Southern Belle, for example, where they're so soft and kind, and then before you know it, you're doing things that you didn't think you wanted to do. That is water in action. They don't, when they want something, they find a way kind of around to get you to think that you want to do what they want you to do. So that's a very, very water type of behavior. People who are really into kind of like this NLP and trying to like, the workings of the mind and how to manipulate it, that's a very, what I would call unbalanced water kind of pursuit. On the positive end, they're the type of people that can stop time and take you to a whole other space when you're in their presence, whether it be conversation or with a lover or whatever. That's the real blessing of a water person, is kind of drawing in and having this magic about them. That's definitely a water trait. Water has a lot of another the gift and challenge of water is fear, and the flip side of fear is wisdom. So you'll see a lot of times water people, a lot of phobias, and they tend to have a history of having struggled with a lot of fears, fear of the dark, fear of water. Those are very big water type fears. And they tend to take on that challenge because that mystery is enough, that curiosity kind of pushes them through the fear, and they can become real daredevils on the other side. So there's this kind of interplay with the extremes of phobia and recklessness, and then also this cautiousness and this fear translating into wisdom. Because if we are foolhardy and we don't have fear, it keeps us from tuning in. When we're afraid of something, we really slow down, get present, and tune into every little detail, and we start to find out where is that edge, where is that boundary of safety, where is it okay. So really looking at the ocean and knowing when it's safe or where it's safe to go in and boogie board or swim or surf, and when it's not. When you're foolhardy, you'll just charge in and like, I'll be fine. But a water person is going to be really tuned in and dialed into those little details of when and where you should do things. Water people in that sense are going to be more difficult to manipulate. Hopefully they'll be less likely to be victims because they're tuning into, their fear keeps them kind of tuned into things and makes them more cautious and more kind of respectful of boundaries that do exist. Kind of what water would see as real boundaries versus human imposed boundaries. Water element is related to the kidney organ system. So there's 5 major organ systems in the body in Taoist Chinese medicine. And each one of them has a particular electromagnetic frequency, a particular type of qi. And when that organ system is kind of predominant in the body, that's when that kind of, those character traits, the emotions, the facial features, everything kind of predominate in that person. So basically, if someone is what we call a water person, their kidney and urinary bladder systems are energetically predominant in their body. And that brings it with it the good and the bad. So the kidneys in Chinese medicine are really important. They're important in Western medicine as well, but more than just filtering out toxins from the body, they are also the reserves of what we call our Jing, our adrenal complex in the body. Has a lot to do with our hormonal functioning and our DNA, our ability to procreate. That procreative energy is all stored in the kidneys in Chinese medicine language. So there's a lot of, it has a lot to do with the spirituality and with the going deep, the kind of like the marrow, the core of who we are. Those are all kidney related ideas. So if you think about, if you want to create more water, if you want to strengthen the kidney organ system in your body, what you really want to do is engage in more water types of activities, is really consciously kind of resonate with water energy in your life. And you can do that by being in water. A lot of water deficient people crave being by large bodies of water, so being by the ocean or being by lakes. Being in the water is really important when people are water deficient, because they're really trying to bring in that element into their bodies. So if you are needing more flexibility, if you're needing more depth in your life, if you're wanting to be more creative, more of a visionary, you want to start getting into water. So being around water, also maybe looking at water art, which is going to be more mysterious. It's going to depict bodies of water. It's going to be more flowing. It's going to be more enigmatic. Watching foreign films or more mysteries, film noirs, those types of things. One of the best water activities is to just wander. So just go, maybe go for a hike, maybe walk around even a mall or wherever, and just don't have a purpose, don't have a place that you're going to, just kind of wander. It's great to do that with kids and with animals because they do that naturally, they just wander. And you can just allow them to take you down different paths and not having a time frame. So I think that's something that's really important. I think because our societies don't really foster water anymore, we don't really take that time for ritual, for deep spiritual contemplation, for those kinds of deep conversations with other people. It's harder to find those times. And so I think that in our Western society now, we have to really make time for that. And that's going to build our kidney organ system. It's going to help with our hormone functioning. It's going to help us with building our spirituality, building our wisdom, our creativity, all of these things that we can bring into every area of our lives. And maybe drink some Kava to help facilitate that as well. That's all I have for this morning. Please leave comments, questions. I would love your feedback on what you would like to hear from me.